Once upon a time, there were millions of businesses struggling. Every day they wasted time, effort, and energy on repetitive tasks that added no value. One day, the Better Automation podcast came to help them find a way. Because of this, these businesses save time, reduce costs, innovate, and make better decisions. Because of that, these businesses grow, scale, and use human creativity to change this world. Hello, my name is Aziz, and I'm your host at Better Automation Podcast by PROCESIO, where I interview the world's top experts and share their very best ideas on how to improve automation in your business processes and life. My guest today is Greg Smith. Greg was previously a head of customer operations and the employee number 2 at GoFundMe. In addition to advising, he is the owner at Wheelhouse Solutions. Greg operates at the convergence of BizOps and No Code, where he helps startups save time and money by optimizing their people, processes, and technology. When he is not automating and optimizing business processes, Greg spends time with his kids, travels, plays golf and guitar, and enjoys life in Encinitas Beach, California. Greg, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Aziz. Thanks for having me.
It's my honor. It's my privilege. It's going to be a wonderful experience, I am sure, because I feel the vibe. And I want people to benefit. I want everybody who's listening to think, wow, this is like a floodgate of value that opened up. So, when it comes to business ops and to automation, let's say someone has a different background, but they're put in a position, or nowadays they need to, optimize their business processes. They need to automate more, and all that. How did you come to understand the value of it? Do you have examples that let you know and think, wow, life would have been different if I didn't have access to these tools or these thought processes or mapping the process on a whiteboard or whatever? Like, share something that really can give the people that understanding, importance, and value that you see in automation and biz ops thinking.
Sure. Well, thank you for the lovely intro. I appreciate it. And so I think a lot of biz ops in general or automation, this whole world still just stems from business outcomes, right? We get excited about the technology and what we can do and the extensibility of this stuff. But I still think it goes back to what is the outcome that we're trying to get to. And now we just have different tools. So I think the evolution of the tools have also evolved every role within an organization, right? And so in my approach, I guess to kind of back up and go to 30,000 foot view, I think the greatest sentence a founder or a team leader can hear is, never mind, I figured it out. And the tools like the Zapiers or the Airtables or any of these automation tools give people the ability to do a lot more without the need for development resources. And so when you're working in any early stage, any size company, really, there's still business outcomes and needles and KPIs that you're trying to hit. These tools make that possible. And I think some of the biggest opportunities in this world isn't necessarily these massive automations or high tech, processes, but more people that simply just don't know what's possible. Even more tech timid industries that I've worked with, construction and interior design and things like that, where these people know the hell out of their business and they know how to build a house, or they know how to work as a plumber or carpenter or any of these other types of industries. The tools that are available now can revolutionize how those industries operate and how those businesses operate. The problem is technology is really scary, and and they simply just don't know what's possible. So if it seems like technology, it seems like, okay, we need to hire a software engineer, we need to build these things and try and automate some of the mundane, but really it couldn't be simpler. They just simply don't know what's possible and how simple it can be to do these things. An example, one of the examples I'll give you is one of my clients owned a retail shoe store in Arizona, and during COVID, at the start of the pandemic, he had to shut down his business, and so he had all this inventory, and it was a franchise, and so I was able to quickly spin up a Shopify website and get him selling online, so he could sell the inventory that he had. But also, the franchise had a warehouse full of inventory as well that's just kind of sitting there. And so the opportunity was, how do we build the website for a fairly tech timid, it was a shoe franchise retailer, but we needed to somehow sync what was in the inventory at headquarters with the inventory that was in his store, his retail store in Arizona, and have that run real time. And it's funny because some of my most complex automations and processes are around a shoe retailer, versus some of the more high tech companies that I've worked with. And so it's interesting how we've been able to leverage tools like Zapier and find some very niche tools in the e-commerce space, to go out there and figure out a way to keep the inventory synced. What was happening is he can also sell on Amazon, but when he was selling on Amazon, it wasn't pinging the warehouse database, so he was selling shoes that weren't actually in stock. We just recently, in the last couple of weeks, figured that out using Airtable and all these automations and notifications and stuff. And these last few days, he's been sending me text messages, just kind of celebrating. We didn't do any refunds this week, or we didn't have to cancel any orders because we didn't have the thing in stock. So just things like that, really drive me in my day-to-day business too. I love seeing people realize the potential of their business using some of these tools.
Thank you. And I want to stress that it's not optional to do this anymore. It's a jungle out there, and every little competitive advantage you can have makes a difference. I know you were speaking about it. Someone might listen and say, well, the way you've been doing it so far has been working all right. And yes, of course, what I need is to sell more, not to think about biz ops and not to automate, or even, to me, it's just the time you take to automate or to think about your biz ops. You can find inefficiencies, you find ways to improve that make the whole difference. What's your perspective on this?
It does come down to your outcomes. It does come down to the KPIs. The way that I approach any of the companies that I work with, I say it's people, process, capital THEN, then technology. Because at the end of the day, it's still, we need to figure out what we're driving towards, right? And there is such thing, like the two things that I caution too, there is such thing as over automation, where you've automated so much for the sake of automation that you're not actually feeling the pain. And I think pain is a really important thing in business. I think pain is something that helps you gauge the severity of what's going on. If you've automated, an error report on a website or on a product, and you've made it just, automatic, for example, automatically go straight to your spam, or because you're annoyed with the notifications, it's telling you that there's a huge indicator that something's wrong with your business. And so, I've had scenarios where I've gone into clients where there's, they've automated so much that we're looking at certain things like, do we know that there's, 10 notifications a day, or are we even getting a notification when the site's down, or when, when there hasn't been a sale in 3 hours? I'll tell you a story early on at GoFundMe. One of the first few months I was there, somebody was having an issue. I was running customer service, and somebody was having an issue with their unsubscribe. They were trying to unsubscribe from notification emails, and I was testing it. I said, no, it seems to be working fine. And I came back from lunch, and we had no tickets. And at that time, there was really high volume, like 1,500 tickets a day. And so we came back, and we were like, oh, look at that. We perfected the product. Nobody reached out for any sort of support help. And it's like, no, it turns out I unsubscribed from my job. I unsubscribed from support at GoFundMe.com, and none of the emails were showing up. So we turned that back on, and a flood of notifications all came back in. And so there is such thing when I look at approaches to any type of business operations. You want that right mix of pain and notification, ways so you're not over automating, right? And the attraction to wanting to do that, because as business operators and as somebody who has these really powerful tools that we may not have had previously, it's such a fun thing to do, to build. And I can take that a step further, and I can automate this piece of it, and then it can send send a notification, or it can automatically send an email out to a customer based on exactly what they bought. But it's a lot of that times, especially early on, I work with a lot of early stage startups. You need to feel that pain. You need to see those, and maybe it's not pain, but you need those indicators to help you gauge what's actually happening in your business.
Thank you. So if I understood you correctly, we have to, in every business, notice the symptoms of pain or the pain points and automate in order to fix them rather than what happens. And I love productivity, so I was involved in that niche a lot as someone learning, and people spend more time optimizing their systems than using them. It was one of the gripes. So it's like people who love efficiency, they will over automate, as you said, for the sake of it, efficiency for the sake of efficiency rather than not. And okay, let's get very practical. Imagine someone wants, let's say, to hire an automation expert. They explain to them what should they be aware of, how can they evaluate the person, and very importantly, how would you approach an automation project in order to decide on the right KPIs rather than on vanity metrics, in order to understand what should be automated and what is wasted, like process and energy and resources? Tell me more when it comes to a project. Someone wants to understand how things go, how things work, and how to choose the right person.
Sure. I think you touched on some of it, where it is those KPIs. It's a lot of the same vein. It's I think when I start with the person, you understand the skill sets that you have within your business, right? And so if Aziz is a salesperson and he's spending 45% of his day selling, because he's spending the other 65 in Salesforce updating records, we need him spending as close to 100% of his time doing that, right? And so when you approach how you're going to do that, you need to really understand the person and what they do well, right? A marketing person versus a salesperson versus an operations person. How do you maximize their time doing the thing that they're paid to do, versus how much time are they fumbling around in software, updating records, and how much of that stuff is really important? And so again, I go back to the people, and then the process. What are the outcomes, and what are the KPIs that we're trying to hit here? And is it possible for Aziz to hit his goals in the time allotted during a week, a month, or a day, right? Like, can he do that? And if all signs point to yes, he can, but he's spending too much of this other time, in some of the mundane. That's really where we start. It's like the low hanging fruit, automatic emails that go out. Starting there, right? Like, what are the things that do consume that other piece where you feel like you're wasting time, or you're doing more of the mundane, updating records, data entry, things like that. You need to look at the person first and what their skill set is, and understand how do we maximize that person's time to be doing those things. That's really how I approach it. It's never. I try and stay fairly software agnostic, And I think when I go into a business, all this automating consulting and no code, like nobody types in no code, right? They're still just like, I'm trying to increase my efficiency or reduce my expenses. It's still that. So it's still just business consulting. But at the end of the day, we have better tools and we've learned more to be able to do a lot more with that. But I still think it comes back to getting the most out of the person. And so these tools help supercharge the person to do the job that they're hired for.
It reminds me of there is a cognitive bias, which is a complexity bias that human beings trust or believe or feel that the more complex a system is or an automation, the better quality it is, that simplicity is childish and useless. While deep thinkers, whether Einstein or others, will say that simplicity is the highest form of sophistication, or things should be as simple as possible, but no simpler, or Occam's razor and all that stuff. Do you agree with this? Because some people, and I heard a business person who was quite well known saying that complexity is my competitive advantage. My system is so complicated that competitors cannot replicate it, and therefore I'm safe. While others will say if it's too complicated, nobody understands what's going on and too much time is wasted. How do you approach this? Do you believe that things should be so simple that could be like diagrammed on the back of a napkin? Or are you in the middle? Or do you believe complexity is cool? Or tell me more about this.
There's a spectrum, right? And I think it depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking about a product, then complexity is a moat and a differentiation in a product or in a business, right? And so complexity could be a great thing because it's something that was really hard and it's not very easy to replicate. When I'm doing on a product side, I believe that is true, and that's great. The greatest algorithms and a lot of work and thoughtfulness has gone into it. On the process side, I think simplicity is the way that you want it, is the way that I approach it anyway. And a lot of times it's not even the technical complexity, it's the asking why 5 times, and it's people doing things that they've been told to. We're surrounded by so much content and so many different ways to do marketing, and so many different, if you've spent any time in the business Twitter world, the top 5 ways and the top 7 ways and the top 10 ways to do every aspect of every job. At the end of the day, I think it becomes the action and the action you take on those things and kind of picking a lane and doing it. But I think in the business process world, simplicity is the way. But I have some very complex automations and things that have to happen that way. But I'm constantly looking at them and saying, every bit of complexity in my business processes is a potential for error, right? And is a potential for things to fail. And so I'm trying to remove steps, or can I consolidate a technology, and can I consolidate my software and certain steps in order to reduce the amount of friction or reduce the amount of potential for error along the way. And so I think it goes. I think good. I'm blown away by complex automations and systems. I think it's awesome, and I've worked. I've done the no code fellowships and the on deck stuff, and there's just some brilliant people in there doing some amazing things. And as operators and automators, we can be impressed and flex our muscles on the things that we've done, but at the end of the day, the client doesn't really care, and they just need the thing to work, right? Like my shoe store guy, the more complexity scares him. He goes, I don't understand it. I can't wrap my head around it. And to be honest with you, it scares me. Just hang with me here, and so all I'm doing is trying to reduce that complexity.
It reminds me of those, ad agencies that win awards for creativity rather than effectiveness and sales. And therefore, like you said, the clients or the businesses, what they care about is increase in sales, not how beautiful and futuristic and the constructivist ad is, which is what the creative awards are usually given for. And also, it reminds me of the theory of constraint, which is a methodology in finding, bottlenecks in systems, and that at its purest form, when you make a system totally efficient, the bottleneck becomes in your mind and the assumptions made. And too many people are living in a world where there are assumptions that are the bottlenecks that are destroying their ops and their businesses, or reducing the KPI reaching. And no amount of automation, of course, automation is important, but no amount of automation will fix the wrong premise or the wrong assumption. How do you think business people can go about testing their assumptions, or finding contrary assumptions that will open new ways of thinking, open new perspectives that allow them to become truly more effective and efficient?
Yeah, and I like the word you used. I like constraints. I think constraints are a big piece of this. GoFundMe, we were bootstrapped, and so every time one of our competitors got a round of funding, we'd celebrate because we knew that it was going to take them 3 to 6 months to get a whole bunch of new team members up to speed. They were going to probably install an expensive software that's going to take a long time for them to get up to speed at. And it was that abundance. And right now in business and in the world, there is an abundance of information. There's an abundance of tools. There's an abundance of advice. And I still think action is the best way forward. During that time, since we were bootstrapped, we were working off of the money that we were earning from actual revenue, and we never talked to VCs. We never went up to the Valley. We were here in San Diego, but we removed things. So people were like, "Can you connect to MailChimp, or can you connect to Salesforce, or and they wanted all these different partnerships, and it was no, we're just going to make this product as dead simple as possible, and then invest our money into the people and into our customer service." So we had a 5-minute reply time on all incoming tickets, and it was dead laser focus on that. There were certain itches we had to scratch on the bizdev side, but we never had a marketing team or a sales team, and that's not the usual for most businesses. But I think constraints and saying no is a big piece of this, right? And it's still as flashy and cool and wonderful as some of the software and these tools are. I love the simplest products out there. I love the stories of the browser extension that's worth billions, right? Like Grammarly, or I think that's wonderful because not like I've spent the last 20 years in San Diego technology space, but I grew up, blue collar suburbs of Boston, never knew about technology or software, what these guys could do. And so my application isn't this bleeding edge, how to stay as high tech as possible. It's how do we take this and help people. Some of my favorite things are my personal little automations and things that I do around the house. I think the simpler the better, but I think to go back to the long-winded way around that is constraints and saying no to certain things and trying to stay laser focused on, it might only be 1 or 2 KPIs and it might be boring, but just keep hitting that. And GoFundMe, that's what we did. It was, how do we make it easier for people to sign up? And then if people are going through some of the most emotional things in their life, there should be a human being there, and they should be there very quickly, and they should be useful, and they should get them on their way as fast as possible. And so those were the 2 things that we really approached there. And those were our constraints. Okay, do we need, what else do we need? And instead of adding, we consistently tried to remove things to get out of our way to make those 2 pieces easier.
And that's an absolutely important point, that every business person, entrepreneur, founder, or whoever is listening, they should map out everything that they're doing and ask, do we need to do this? Is this adding value? And eliminate anything that doesn't, because really, saying no to the wrong things, or, I remember Peter Drucker, he has a quote that there is no bigger waste, something like that. There is no bigger waste than doing efficiently things that should not be done at all. So having clarity on which processes lead to the outcomes that the business is looking for and eliminating anything else. Like there are many jobs that are, or I remember there is a book, it's about all kinds of jobs that are BS jobs, as he calls it, where those jobs are useless, but they just there either because other people have done them before and therefore the company feels bigger when they include them, or they just make them look cool or anything like that, but they don't add any value. And really, in this world, trimming the fat, automating what needs to be automated, doing things well, and focusing on your core competency is the whole difference maker. Well, Greg, this was a pleasure and very enriching conversation. If people want to learn more about what you do, can you share about that? Where can they connect with you? And I'll make sure to write your Twitter in the description as well.
Sure, you can just go to gregcsmith.me. And that's a personal/professional website, and it has all my social links on there, and writing and podcasts and stuff like that. So this was great. I really enjoyed the conversation, Aziz.
Thank you. And I cannot end without sharing PROCESIO, which is what makes this whole podcast possible. PROCESIO is the modern low-code, no-code platform for advanced automation and creating an enterprise-grade backend for your software. You can even automate on-premise if need may be. You can get, any listener, free access to an account at PROCESIO that gives you 1 full hour of running time, which is equivalent to of execution time, which is equivalent to 100 human hours. And if you need more, you can get a very generous 50% discount by using better 50 off, capital letters, one word. You can see it also written in the description. Thank you so much. It was my privilege, my honor, and I'm looking forward to even more conversations with you. And I wish you a great day there in Encinitas.
Thank you. You too. Thanks, Aziz.